Hi everyone, how are you today? So this is going to be episode 1 of a little series that I'm going to be calling just Jibber-Jabber. It's going to be sort of a sit-down, chit-chat sort of show where we will share ideas with one another. I will give you my opinion on things, my experience on matters. We'll be able to share stories back and forth with one another, and it'll be an interactive show between you and I. When my tripod comes in, these shows will be more face-to-face, so they'll be a little bit more personable. But as for today, since I don't have my tripod, we just have these 2 little cute pads. So what I wanted to talk about today was how I used to use cloth pads when I didn't have my own home. So I was sharing a home with my mom and my grandmother, and how I navigated that. So perhaps if you're new to pads, you'll kind of see that it's not such a daunting task. Now, that being said, no one that I lived with necessarily had any sort of prejudice against cloth pads, so I didn't have anyone that was telling me that I couldn't wash them or that they were dirty or they didn't want them there, so I wasn't in that sort of predicament. They didn't necessarily care about them as long as they weren't, in their face or on the floor or anything like that. Exposed where guests might see or something along those lines. So when I first started using cloth pads, I had taken an old suitcase that I had thrifted and I had reupholstered it, and that was what I kept my cloth pads in. And by suitcase I mean like an old travel cosmetics case sort of thing. So not like a great big suitcase, but it might have been like 14 inches by maybe like 4 inches and 6 inches deep. So it wasn't this huge container, but it was something that I had the ability I could close the lid on and store my cloth pads, and even if someone did see it, they would just think it was sort of an aesthetic thing. So for a while, that was what I stored my cloth pads in, and at this point in time, I didn't have a need for a large amount of pads, so that amount of storage was sufficient for me at that time. I would keep my little travel cosmetics case under the bathroom sink, where most people have a cabinet under there if you don't have a pedestal sink or something like that. And I would keep my little box with my pads in there, and when I had my period and I had a pad that I had used, I would put them in a mesh laundry bag, and that would sit behind the cosmetics case so that it wasn't anything that anybody would see up front, but it was something that I still had access to. So my cosmetics case would be sitting in the front, and then in the back of the cabinet would be the mesh laundry bag with my pads in it. And that was a good situation for everyone because they didn't have to see them. If anyone came in to use the restroom, they weren't coming in contact with them, but the pads were still getting airflow and they were still in the open, and that was kind of why I had chosen a mesh laundry bag, because I knew that they would be in the cabinet. So with the mesh laundry bag, I knew that the pads would be getting air from all sides and they wouldn't be zipped up in a pouch somewhere. At this point in time, I was hand washing all of my pads. My mom did tell me that she didn't want me to wash them in the washing machine. So I was washing all of them by hand, and at this point in time, I didn't have the means to do my wash cycle like I do now, because I didn't have the space for me to be able to soak my pads anywhere that wasn't going to be obtrusive to anyone. So I would take my pad off. So for instance, this is my pad. I would remove it from my underwear. I would take it to the sink and run it under the water like this, and let the water run through. If I had PUL in the pad, I would stand it up and let the water run down like this, because sometimes with PUL pads, the water will just keep hitting the back and it can't go through. So if you stand it up like this, the water will run down the pad and it'll help get the blood out. So as soon as I took it off, I would rinse it out and squeeze it like this. You don't ever want to wring your pads because that's not good for them. So I would just roll them up like this, give them a squeeze. That's also a good way for you to rinse your pads, especially if they have PUL, for you to just roll them up and put them like this under the sink and let it wash down. That way you'll have more surface area for the water to come in contact with. And from there, I would take them and I would store them damp in the laundry bag. I would also stain treat at that point. So once my pad was rinsed and it had come out of my underwear, if there was any blood left on it, I would stain treat at that point, and then I would put them in the mesh laundry bag until I was able to wash them. And once they were all rinsed and had their stain treater on them, then I would, one evening when no one needed the bathtub, I would take my pads out, put them in the bathtub, put them in there with some laundry detergent, and I would hand wash them one by one. And I had made a hanger situation where I had taken a clothes hanger, and on the little flat bottom part, I sewed a piece of fabric, and to that fabric I had ribbon hanging down that had snaps on the end of each, and I would snap my pads to that and hang them, or I would lay them out on my bed with a fan in front of them if they couldn't be hung up anywhere on the hanger. I would just lay them on my bed with the fan on them, and that's how they would dry. That was an acceptable situation when I was living in that. I didn't have anyone telling me, for instance, for religious reasons or health sort of reasons, concerns that anyone might have, that I wasn't allowed to have my pads out or anything like that. Nobody necessarily cared as long as they didn't have to come in contact with soiled, wet pads, or they were just hanging in the laundry room, and somebody came through and was like, oh my god, what's those? So nobody really cared whether or not I was using cloth pads, so that wasn't an obstacle that I had to overcome personally. But they did have issue with me just storing them, so just having them like hanging out soiled in a bucket somewhere or something like that. They didn't necessarily want me to have them in the sink soaking for a long amount of time, so that was the method that worked for me, was to store them in my little suitcase, rinse them and stain treat them as they came off, and then at the end of my cycle I would launder them, put them on my bed, and let them dry. When I first started using cloth pads, I was like 17, 18 years old, something like that. So I was still living at home, but I didn't have, those restrictions that other people might have. I have heard that people have said that their parents absolutely won't let them have pads. They don't care for them to have them. They think that they're gross or disgusting or something like that. And to that, I would just say that your best option might be to try and educate them, to kind of let them know and see, these are people's wash routines after they're laundered. This is how people's pads look, things like that, to kind of dispel the iffiness that they might have. And I was in a predicament where I wasn't permitted to use the washing machine. So if that is something that you yourself have that blockage in front of you, that you aren't allowed to use the washing machine, then that's definitely something that you can work around, and you can hand wash your pads. Or another option you might have would be to take them into the shower with you, and as your shower starts or ends, you can have your pads on the shower floor, and that'll kind of rinse them out and take care of them for the time being. I've heard of people actually taking the time during their shower to launder their pads one by one. So that's also an option that you would have available to you. Or if you're responsible for your own laundry, so your own day-to-day clothes and sheets and things like that, then you may just be able to put your pads in the laundry with your sheets and then take them out. But if that's not something that your parents would be very forgiving of, then that may not be something that's available to you at that point in time. But when I was hand washing them one by one, that was a very feasible wash routine for me. I didn't find that it was particularly strenuous or anything like that, so it wasn't anything that was very hard on me. So hand washing them might be an option for you, especially if you hand wash them if your parents are at work, or later in the evening once everyone's gone to bed and no one will have need of using that room, so that wouldn't be an issue for you. I do know that on YouTube there are several videos that people have made about using cloth pads discreetly, so that may be an avenue that you want to pursue, see what other people have tried and what has worked for them. I of course wasn't in any sort of situation where I had been specifically told not to use cloth pads. I couldn't use cloth pads. That wasn't the situation that I was in. I was permitted to use them. No one had any issue with them. I just wasn't allowed to wash them in the washing machine. So if you are finding yourself in a situation where your parents or your roommates or whomever has any sort of iffiness or reservations around you using cloth pads, then my suggestion personally would be to kind of dispel those rumors as best you can. Maybe show them, if they're open to it, this is someone's wash routine, this is their pads afterwards. You see, they're completely clean. I can do a pre-wash, I can do a pre-soak. There's nothing wrong with that. They can dry on my bed. They don't have to be hanging up in your face somewhere. And kind of show them they won't have need of caring for them. It's something that would be your decision to care for, and maybe that would help them feel a little more at ease about you using cloth pads if it's something that wouldn't be their responsibility, and it's something that wouldn't be overtly in their face sort of thing. Because I know that some people come across for cloth pads as, it's kind of old and it's very, oh, you're putting towels in your underwear and oh my gosh, you're just gonna have bloodstained rags and things like that. And so, showing them and letting them know, like, no, these are the pretty cloth pads that I'm talking about. I'm not talking about dirty old torn up rags, or these pads that people are showing you have been cleaned and laundered, and as you can see, they don't have stains on them, sort of thing. So that might put them at ease if that's any sort of advice that I would be able to give you. And of course, you can always comment down in the comments down below if you have any questions, if anyone down there might have an answer for you, or if you have any tips for anyone that you have tried, anything that I haven't thought of here or maybe no one else has covered before. Let other people know that this is what worked for you, and that might also be something that they could explore. So that is going to be it for me today. Thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with me today. I definitely appreciated it. If you like, you can go ahead and hit the subscribe button down below. That way you're notified every time that I upload a new video. And as well as that, while you're down there, you can hit the like button. That just helps YouTube get the video out to more people, and it would be able to be shown to someone who might have need of the advice that I have or that my subscribers have down in the comments below. So again, thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with me today. I definitely appreciate it, and you enjoy the rest of your day, okay?